And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. Thank you for tuning in. If you can do me a favor, if you can like, share, and review this. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please share it on your social media. Help us to grow the show. I'm very excited today. I have a returning guest for episode 40. His name is Mark Simo. He's one of the most popular episodes that I've had so far. Mark is one of the founding members of a few brands you may have heard of, Life's a Beach and No Fear, to name a few. Most currently, he is the founder of TrustMe Vodka. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Hey, Wes, thanks for having me back. Love what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, it was really exciting to get to meet you a couple weeks ago here in Idaho. It was a crazy event, and it's amazing to see how many people are really invested in TrustMe.
Yeah, there's great folks out there. It was great to get to meet you face to face. It was a wonderful experience, and I got to say that the people in Idaho are real friendly.
Yeah. So speaking of that, can you tell us we're kind of going to do this a little bit different than the normal format because you're a returning guest, and we talked a little bit about kind of picking a few things apart and how you create a brand and things like that. But let's talk about TrustMe first this time, and then we'll move into that other stuff because I think that it'll be some good information for other people to hear about how to create a brand and things like that. So how is TrustMe doing right now as a business?
Amazingly, with this year being one of the strangest ones on record, with the COVID in particular, our business is better than ever. I think categorically I've been fortunate because people drink more, stores, restaurants got shut down, but we picked up, we've more than doubled our business. So this pandemic's created an unusually fertile environment for us to grow. I think that people are receptive to new ideas during this period. In retrospect, I do feel sometimes tough situations create some unusual opportunities.
Yeah, and as one of those kind of early, I don't know. I kind of got into the middle of the last, I guess, quarter in the investor portion of that, but you can see how fast the rounds are going now. So it's totally moving a lot faster. I think that's pretty much an indicator of where things are going. Where would you have thought it would bend towards this point? Is this kind of where you thought it'd be at, or is it growing way faster than what you thought?
Well, oftentimes you start out with a plan, and it doesn't always work out the way you want. I think you have to start out with some idea or some type of a plan. In this particular case, I drew back on some experience. As you do things several times, you become, more maybe proficient at understanding how things work. I always thought that this would be exponential in terms of, as time goes by and more people get involved, it builds on itself. And it turned out to be exactly that. With our growing group, it just gets faster every round. It's a unique opportunity. I've some interesting things have happened that I've studied based on our sort of crowdsourcing strategy. I followed Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba, and his Ant Group IPO that didn't get off. It was supposed to be the biggest IPO in the world's history, and the demand for the brand for Ant Group, which is a financial tech or fintech company, was $3 trillion in all from small investors. So I feel fortunate that some of the things that I hoped would happen are happening through that same kind of an idea. We're creating a following, a committed following. You can create an extraordinary environment. And so there are some examples of far bigger than my scope of vision was when I thought about it.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like I was talking about, it's kind of like the rounds are going so fast, and then you end up having to probably kind of punt on some of the things that you're thinking about. How is the distribution going? Because I'm assuming that you have to move things out a lot faster with that. Have you had to ramp up the distribution with everything going? Have you had to go different avenues that you were thinking about that you didn't think about in the beginning?
Well, on some levels, this year you had to be a lot more defensive. Things that you didn't think we were very fortunate to not have been interrupted. So many things could have gone wrong. Making the glass on a timely basis, it takes a long time. The acceleration being, caught unprepared. Raw materials that could be out there. Even now, there's a little bit of a freight issue, delays and different things. We've been fortunate to have been unaffected, but part of it is I started looking further out. That's a technique that you should develop as a core business skill to look in racing. My current racing is looking through the turn further down the track. You don't have to look at your apexes or your turn. You look through them and you can coordinate that turn. So by looking further out, I anticipate, okay, what if there's a glass shortage or there's tariff, there was freight issues, but because we look further out, you can give yourself a broader cushion to navigate through these really turbulent and bizarre situations. I'm still not certain that even I'm looking at every possible problem, but you have to give yourself a risk analysis. That what do I need to do in the event? And that you don't always think that way. And I think that I had some of that experience, and I was able to look further out and anticipate some of the things that were happening, and including growth. I mean, growth catches a lot of entrepreneurs out, starts to accelerate, and then they're not prepared. So being prepared, I guess, success is where opportunity meets preparation. And so I feel like from that standpoint, we've been fortunate, especially this year.
Yeah, and in our last interview, we talked a little bit about how you've created multiple brands, and this is just the latest endeavor. When we talked a little bit, you talked about how, and we're going to let's get more into kind of the branding part of this deal, but we talked a little bit more about how one of the things you said to me was your parents were both teachers. And in my mind, when you look at that, like as a former educator, we always are telling kids they need to go to college, they need to do these things, they need to do those things, And we obviously know that wasn't your mindset. How did your parents look at that when you decided that you're going to pack your stuff and go move to California and just kind of be a beach bum? And what did they say to you?
Yeah, it was absolutely it defied everything they would have ever, expected or wanted me to do. I think over time they begin to realize that we're all largely self-taught anyway. And, I kind of saw that in my younger years. You could learn pretty much anything if you had the desire. And we didn't clearly have the tools that we have today. You can literally learn anything today because you have access to so much information that we didn't have. There's a logic that I always kind of listen to. It's called Wright's Law. I looked it up one time, someone had mentioned it to me. And what that means is no matter what you do, just over time, you'll get better at it. You just can't help but, as long as you're willing to be a little bit flexible, continue to be willing to learn, there's nothing you can't get better at. And I applied that logic across racing cars where there wasn't schooling. You had to really put your butt in a seat and feel and experience it, and you could learn it. Flying helicopters, I took up flying. And largely it wasn't the training that taught you, it's a lot of the experience that you have. So I was always a big believer that your experience is what drives it. I always say that, I'm not smart, but I'm experienced. And it's not to be self-deprecating, but the idea that you gain so much from your experience is to create a lot of those experiences. And you have to be willing to go out and take a few, beatings and have some confidence in what you're doing. And again, everybody has their own recipe for what's success. To me, it boils down to the most simple one. No matter what it is you want to learn, what it is you want to do, the number one ingredient of success is commit. If you commit yourself to it unrelentingly, you can't help but have the odds of success. It's when you start to have doubt about it, and there's no doubt you'll fight doubt. That'll be one of your biggest enemies. But if you commit to it unrelentingly, knowing that every morning you get up, you're going to focus on what that is. I said you really can't fail on any level. You just have to be willing to navigate. You can drive it into a wall, but largely, as long as you continue to be willing to learn and stay committed, and just let the time work for you, you can accomplish pretty much anything you want.
And I like that you tied that. I kind of like that there's kind of this transition into the fact that looking ahead now, you talked about with TrustMe and how you look ahead and you try and be ahead of what's happening, the trends and things like that. Was that something that it's obviously something that you didn't look towards in earlier brands, because now you've learned over time to do that. Was there a struggle with the early brands where you didn't look far enough ahead and then it kind of backfired?
Certainly, there was always situations that come up in multiple situations where you were caught flat-footed, you didn't look far enough, you didn't anticipate, and in retrospect, you go, God, I could have easily have gotten through that and not had that problem occur, not had that situation occur, if I was just willing to look further down the road and anticipate certain things. People don't like to think about the negative in business. What happens if something goes wrong, or if the supply chain gets interrupted, or if you can't get capital. There are no excuses in my book anymore. You just, if you need capital, go get it. If you need experience, go find it. If you need resources, they're out there. And just, remaining committed to the cause allows you to find it. And there's pretty much, you're surrounded by everything you need to succeed. That's in my mind, that's a given. But you have to buy into that principle and trust that it works when you do.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I remember when we talked about Life's a Beach and how you started out there, it was essentially like capital wasn't there. What did we do? How did we make more shorts? How did we make more of the product? We sold what we had and we made it happen. So I really like the fact that you talk about like it's there. You just have to find it. Can you talk about kind of people, like you said, people don't like failure. They think that it's like the worst thing that happens. Can you talk about maybe a time where you did have one of those failures and what you did to rectify that, how you didn't quit? Because obviously you didn't quit. You're still going. You're still plugging away.
Well, I mean, failure is every bit of is an ingredient to success. You can't have every possible thing go right, and those failures become building blocks. Largely, they say the road to success is paved with failures. Now, obviously, in a lot of cases, you have to succeed more than you fail in order to be on the upside of that formula. But failure is it's a learning tool, and sometimes you can only learn things in failure. You can't. Sometimes success doesn't teach you the things you need to know. Failures are probably more developmental. I mean, if you think of a young child falling down, skinning their knees, bumping their head, those small knocks and bumps, teach you, how to do it. And if you're protected from there, you avoid those things. You avoid the very opportunity to learn and to grow. So I don't encourage, seeking failures, but be willing and know that you're going to deal with on multiple levels, some on a large scale, some on a small scale. You're going to deal with failure. You have to embrace that as just part of what it takes to succeed.
And I think that one of the great things about putting yourself out there and taking risk, as we talked about before, is the fact that you have to decide that you're willing to make a mistake and keep going forward. And ultimately you fail when you quit. And that's one of the things that a lot of people they're afraid to put themselves out there because they're afraid to fail, but they don't use it as a learning moment, and they don't learn it, use it to get better or as a stepping stone, like you were talking about.
Right. And I think it's just, programming your brain to be okay with the challenges. And oftentimes, I mean, in most cases, years of not knowing and doubting that it would work, always being willing to try new things, that has to be with it. You have to have some flexibility to be able to adjust and change with it. Even with a gigantic failure, you don't really fail until you stop. So, you can't look at it. Are there inconveniences? Yeah. There's times that I remember, most starts of a business, you don't have the resources, the capital, and you come up with other solutions. Because there's other kinds of capital. There's human capital. There's resourcing at the highest possible level where you figure out how to get things to work with other people's help. Like I said, as long as you're committed, you can find the resources, but you got to be looking, you got to be willing, and sometimes you got to be willing to take a little bit of pain, or discomfort, let's say, at least to progress.
Yeah. And so what do you do? Because we're talking about kind of like, we talked a little bit about like limitless possibilities and how you can create these situations for yourself. As far as like learning every day and building that, what do you do to kind of expand your mind and find those different things that can help you to grow and continue to succeed?
Well, again, a lot of the ideas that will serve you are already available by modeling, by looking at other people's experiences, other people's information, other people's ideas, and coming up with your own hybrids of those. You don't have to reinvent everything in order to be an entrepreneur. There's terrific ideas. Like, we would look at Uber as a delivery mechanism. We would look at crowdsourcing as a financial strategy, and marketing methods of using our human connection to create a community. So it's always around you, and you just have to be increasingly aware, increasingly conscious. I did study a few things. I'm not your traditional student. But you and I had chatted a little bit about some of the things you can learn and some of the tools you can create. You mentioned Tony Robbins as maybe kind of an inspiration. I went to some of Tony Robbins' seminars, and I found them to be fascinating, as a way to just learn how to think, learn how to open your mind to new ideas. And there's so much of that available, even more today than I did. My sort of situation is I think I should even be more open than not, because I'm sure there's been such advances in things I'm fascinated with, neuro-linguistic programming. Somebody raised that as an issue with me recently, and I was involved in a bit of learning on that, where you can program your mind to create situations, mostly overcoming your own limitations in your brain that just hold you back. And and you don't see certain things that are available because you're clouded by your own habits and judgments that are sort of pre-programmed in your brain. So deprogramming, forgetting what you learned becomes part of the process, letting go of bad habits. So as you mentioned, my parents weren't a fan of what I was doing. I had to really sort of deprogram myself and say, hey, I don't need to believe those things. I don't need to believe that the only path for me was college. And like, even though it was really drilled into me, but so deprogramming some of those thoughts becomes a building block too, where you're letting go of preconceived notions, being open to new ones.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I had a friend one time he told me this story about creating a pickle. It was interesting how he talked about it's really easy to make a pickle, but you can't unpickle a pickle. And the funny thing about that whole situation was that I'm sitting here, I told you, I just turned 40 last week, and you looked at me when I said that to you, that I'm almost 40 and I'm just figuring this out. And you said, you're young. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that there's so much time. And the hard part is, like you said, deprogramming that or unpickling that pickle, because you've spent 39 years or however long you've been doing it, being programmed this way, that this is the way that it should be. This is the way that it has to be. And then realizing that, no, it doesn't. You can create your own path and you can build that for yourself.
Absolutely. That's the biggest barrier to succeeding at anything. Is just really getting past that you really don't run out of time until you're no longer here. I mean, as they say, it's never too late. Amazing stories. The founder of Grey Goose, Sidney Frank, didn't start until he was 80, and sold it for $2.5 billion. And I heard, I think it was Diane Sawyer interview Clint Eastwood, and he missed acting and directing, and he's like, "What do you mean? My best work's still ahead of me." And that's the kind of mindset that I think will really help you. That it's never too late. There's nothing you really can't achieve. You commit yourself to it, and sometimes it takes longer. Oftentimes, almost always, costs more than you thought. And the cost isn't just capital; it largely is, but it's also the time you have to give, and the some of the other things you could be doing have to take a back seat. You do have to have a sort of a focus to especially through the critical junctures of startups and other things until they start operating, and you start to get some of your time back. So absolutely, the limitations are all in your head.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing that some people this day and age don't really understand, that it's one of those things. Like I told you, the reason why I asked you that question is because my parents, like I said, the same way. They didn't go to college. The process was, you need to go to college because we didn't go, and you need to be better than that. You need to be better than me. Well, hard work really paid off for them. They worked their butt off. They had to work a little bit harder, but they weren't stuck in a situation because they were willing to work harder, which is what I like, is they taught me that hard work will pay off in the end if you're willing to do it.
Well, that was something that I had to work through too, because I was raised with that same mentality. All I have to do is outwork my competition. And I used to think that way. Get there an hour earlier than my competition, stay an hour later than my competition, have a shorter lunch than my competition. That was a path to success. And it does take energy and effort to make things go. But I think the consciousness now is that it isn't the same anymore. Successes happen much faster. Resources become much more available. If you look, and there's examples, I have mentors that I've never met because I like what they do. I like what Elon Musk does in his thinking. I mean, creating PayPal and Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company, and to the scale of his thought, and just just watching what fascinating people do and say that there's available, like on your show. There's amazing information that gets transferred every day that will really serve you and create these opportunities. If you just find that heart, to just follow your dreams and your vision and go for it. And that's once you have that, then it just becomes a game of listening.
Yeah, and that's kind of the golden thing about that, is that, like you said, you've said this a couple times, but there is so many things out there. There's so many people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to be willing to try it. If you have an idea, get out there, push yourself, and kind of take that risk. Don't be afraid of failing. It's just a great concept. If people could just get past that mental block and be willing to work a little bit harder, anything is possible.
Right. I mean, a lot of times you measure your success in dollars and cents. I mean, money's just a measure. Sometimes it's only one measure, but it's certainly a measure. And really, if I was encouraging anybody at this point in my experience in my life, it would be to exercise your imagination. Sounds funny. There's such a thing as exercising your imagination. And I would argue that's the biggest thing that will help you is to imagine your future and let it manifest it by, committing to seeing clearly what that future is or what you want it to be. And so imagining your success is vital. And today things happen so quickly that you literally, your life could change in a matter of months or years. It's short term. It's not like, you had to work till you were 65 and then get your gold watch and take your pension. So, like I said, it is a fascinating world to be in. And if your imagination is working for you, it's a terrific tool.
Yeah, your life is exactly how you design it. If you design it to just be complacent and just kind of go with the flow, that's what it's going to be like. You have the choice.
Clearly.
Hey, so I want to talk a little bit, about, I've got the title here, Creating a Brand, and you've created multiple brands. And I want to kind of break down how you would go about doing that. Because like you said, there's a wealth of knowledge, but a bunch of people may not have that information. They may not know how to do that, how to create, how to start, how to, get it going. What are kind of, I want to talk about kind of what are the bones. I have this idea. I was down in Arizona for Thanksgiving. I went down there. We did the thing you're not supposed to do. We traveled. And I was sitting in by the pool, and I was talking to my brother-in-law about this situation that I thought about. And it's actually going to come into fruit. It's going to happen. But we're working on the start of it. My thoughts were, because it's kind of like a real estate thing, is that we should get a group together and buy a property in Arizona. We like to go down there, kind of like a timeshare between like 10, 15 people and buy that, but not just stop there. We'll start with one property and then we'll continue and buy more and more based off the profits of that one. So when a person stays there, like part of the group can stay there 1 week a year. And then after that, we're renting it out. How would you sell that? How would you create something like that to sell to an investor in order to get people to invest in that?
I had this discussion with my daughter. I have a daughter in college. She wanted to go to college, and I let her have that experience. And I tell her that there's other paths, but she decided she wanted to go. But I would teach her the exact same thing, and I'd say the same thing to you. Everything that you are and everything you do can be branded. I believe in branding and how people interpret things. If you see yourself as a brand, just your own self, Wes is a brand. People interpret brands and they either believe in it or they don't. They trust it or they don't. They care about it or they don't, based on what you provide. Whether it's a product or service, whether it's real estate or vodka or sunglasses, everything is a brand on some level. And if you treat it as such, then you put the care and consideration into what makes people want to participate with it. Branding to me isn't labeling. Labeling is just slapping a name on something, or sometimes people monetize things just for the sake of generating some cash or cash flow or some money. Branding has to have that a real brand, and so you have to approach it from the very beginning that you're building something that you want people to care about, even though in the beginning they don't know and they don't care about it. So you have to change perceptions of people's minds what it is. Whether if it's an exclusive property that provides something, there's lots of examples of that, of properties that are well known and just fascinate people because someone put the care and consideration to make them feel something. So branding is how you make people feel about what you do, your product or your service. So branding is so broad, but it is has to be so real and so genuine. That's everything you do, no matter what it is. Again, if it's real estate or product. Or any other service for that matter, if you do it well and you treat people right and you include them into it on some level of their experience that they have, they'll reward you with using. And so, but branding has depth. I have an odd naming strategy, and I sort of stumbled into it. The names that I picked had some preconceived meaning, even the brand No Fear or even Trust Me. Sounds silly on the face of it. It's not what you have; it's what you do with that. So you can take it. What's Google? I mean, to me, it's a silly name, but it's what they did with it. There's so many examples, and using those examples to build your product or your service. And as long as you have that passion and really look for the connections with people, then you're brand. And I would advise anybody, no matter what you do, you're going to have a property, make it an amazing property, and create the experience. From the people that deal with it to the views that it has, to the amenities that you create. There's just they're all touch points. And you take for granted of it. You think it's just it's real estate, or it's vodka, or it's a pair of sunglasses. But it's how you made that person feel wearing them, or how that person felt when they stayed there. So that's how I would advise if I was ever giving advice, and I don't like to give advice per se. I would just share my experience, and that would be the broad strokes of that.
Yeah, and you've talked about kind of like living the brand in our last interview about how you do that. And is that kind of what you're getting into, like being the fact that trust me is, hey, trust me, or no fear is living that lifestyle where you're willing to take risk, you're willing to do those things? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Being able to be part of that?
Yeah, to some extent, you do have to live it and breathe it if you're really going to brand it, right? It has to be something that the care you put in comes through. The consideration you put in comes through to the people that you're expecting to get behind you. And it absolutely, you have to have a passion for what you're doing if you want to convince other people to be involved. And that's really what you're doing. You're really just interacting with people, no matter what product or service. And if you value people at a high level, a lot of businesses really serve systems, processes, products, money, and they forget about the most important ingredient to make anything successful is people. And if you learn to treat people right, that's been my kind of lifelong experience. I probably would have done things better had I known some of the things I've learned even lately. That just how people can make you, because they really do make you if you treat them well with your product or your service.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I really like, and I think that is what about TrustMe, is that it's so transparent to everyone that you're involving everyone in it, like you just said. What do you think about sharing kind of like your ideas and things like that? Is that something that you keep in your pocket? I kind of know the answer to this, but is that something you keep in your pocket, or do you like to make sure that everyone knows every ground level part of that they need to know so that they can buy into it?
Yeah, I don't try to hide it. To a large extent, I want people to know what I know, because then you can really include them into it. The idea, the world's changing, in my opinion, and more importantly, to what you're suggesting, engaging a lot of people now is sort of the new world, right? If the Ant Group can create a $3 trillion retail demand with all small investors, it's so powerful that the Chinese government didn't allow the IPO to go through. They just became nearly as powerful as the government. And understanding that is something that I'd love to get credit for parts of it, although there are people doing extraordinarily well with the idea, whether it's Uber, Airbnb with their IPO. I mean, it's crazy now what including people in and using their houses and using their network, and all you're doing is connecting. That's the new business model in my mind, is really understanding that the real power is harnessing, all the people that you can, and to create a result. It's a new economic driver. It eliminates myriad of things that could go wrong, limitations you would impose if you had a sort of a traditional capital strategy where you just get big checks from a few people or institutions or banks. You really don't include people. So if you look at the new business model, all of them are very inclusive to people. And so I don't necessarily want to hide it. I'd like to be recognized to understanding the community strategy and ultimately be known for having understood it and embraced it to be part of that new world. Because I just don't think a lot of people are going to survive without it. It really is the world has changed so quickly. To be competitive in today's world, you have to harness a whole bunch of different energy other than money.
Do you think that, so with like TrustMe, you were talking about the world changing and things like that, it kind of fits in the right spot, don't you think, for the way that you distribute it, the way that we do things with it, and how it's word of mouth versus being, just shoved in your face in this big ad campaign or things like that? Is that kind of what your thought process was when the whole thing went out?
Well, a couple of things that helped me, I guess, I better understand. The name itself forced me to set a standard, because you can't even say the two words trust me, without being able to back that up. I learned a bit of that with the phrase "no fear." If you weren't really out there and taking the risk that you're encouraging people to take, whether it's to quit their job and start a business, to be in sports as opposed to getting a job, or even risk your life in terms of the sort of the extreme sports movement that I grew up in, to feel more alive. The idea is, I guess I might get off topic here a little bit, but using that as a starting point to go, okay, let's make this absolutely inclusive, to where we decentralize the ownership and brought the people into the story. And you really, today, if you're using the energy, people don't trust the government, they don't trust the media, they don't trust big business, they trust their friends and their family. And so you're tapping into where the world currently is in terms of where the energy is going to be drawn from, and what their belief system for branding is going to be built is through the people they trust. They're going to trust their friends and family and the information that they share between themselves more than most other outlets.
So take us through kind of how it came about, because I know you talked last time about how kind of Mitchell had this idea of Trust Me, and then where did it go from there? So you guys talk about it. Did you like brainstorm around a whiteboard? Was it just kind of a table meeting? How does that process start?
Like a lot of ideas, they start out as a vapor. It hasn't turned into even a water droplet at some point. When I heard Mitchell, I asked him about an idea, and he said, "Hey, I got this idea. Trust me." The first thing it did for me is cause a pause. I went, okay. I don't know why it caused me to pause, but it made me think for a second. And I felt that all I needed was that second. If I could cause everybody to take a pause just for a second, that I could be successful. And so I really just wanted to cause the pause and then tell a story. The storytelling is a really important thing in terms of communication. We consider ourselves a communications business, and I'd like to at some point consider us more masters of being able to communicate a message and let the universe do the work for us. But it starts as a vapor, and I have to go back, and you have to trust the idea, no pun intended, that it's not what you have. You could have been 1,000 other names. It's what you do with it. But part of what helped me was telling the story, or telling a story that was believable and digestible and memorable, so people to remember. And then last and most importantly, engaging, one that would cause them to want to be part of it. And so you just take basic vapor and you start to distill it, again, no pun intended, down to a usable medium, to water, ultimately for me, vodka. So, you mull around a lot of different things. Your approach to things, I think, is critical. You can approach things with a vengeance, or with a habit. And for me, it's just, we started at a table, sat down and talked for a while. Time goes by, and we were committed. Once I said, "Oh, I guess let's go," and you commit, and things begin to start to work. And that's the funny part. Everybody thinks sometimes it's you predetermine outcomes. The only predetermined outcome was we were going to commit to it, to success on some level, and our approach was what was going to change. How are we going to approach this? How are we going to convince people to be part of this story? And that's, it was very loose, and I still like to keep it loose. I think you tend to cement things too early. Sometimes that you need to remain fluid for a longer period than you think, in terms of your ability to maneuver, to make changes, to pivot, to look at things and execute things differently until you find the ones that, and you oftentimes just know it intuitively or by experience. Okay, I didn't know that was going to work, but now I have strong commitment to that because I can see how it's working.
And you've always had this kind of core group that you work with, correct? Is there kind of like, do you consider that, like, I don't know if you've heard of a mastermind group. I'm sure you have a mastermind group before. Do you kind of have like these core group of people that you bounce ideas off and you work with in every single endeavor that you have? Has that changed over time and things like that?
That's probably something I could do better in terms of, you're as good as your group of friends or who you surround yourself with, right? That's largely true. I've been a little bit more, it's been more of a habit for me, but also over time, I realized that, if you're going to have any experience in life, you kind of want to share it with someone, and you share it with the people that you know or that you are connected to on some level. You have to remain open to new information, new people, new things coming into your life. In this particular case, I met you and amazing people all around the country, but I didn't get rid of a core group. I probably could do a little better job if you talk about creating sort of a brain situation where you're exercising your brain by bringing people around the table. You still get information, you still get ideas, whether you're looking on YouTube or whether you're sitting down with somebody that you engaged you or you engage in a conversation. Organizing it would probably be something I could do better.
And you talked about mentorship and how you've had mentors, but you never really kind of met them. Do you have some that you kind of look up to and that you will go to for advice, and at times when you kind of you need someone to bounce ideas off of?
Yes, oftentimes some of the people aren't available to actually go to and get that one-off information. But if you study some of the things or just better understand some of the ways that other people solve problems, you can begin to take it. Certainly, I've met some amazing people. I've been very fortunate to have met Phil Knight at Nike and Roger Penske and the founder of Oakley, Jim Gennard, Don Panos. So I met a few billionaires. I sought billionaires out. I wanted to meet them, shake their hand, and understand what makes them different than me. Why is a person who runs $1 billion enterprise different than a person who runs a sub-$1 million enterprise? What makes them different? What's funny is these people are more accessible than the middle management. The middle management seems to be kind of the impediment, I think, because these people that are more than willing to talk with you and share ideas. And if you intersect with them on any level, it's wonderful. Like I said, I've never met Elon Musk. I'd like to. I think he's a fascinating human being, and his visions are amazing. But I'm inspired by that guy every day. And you can ask yourself the question: what would he do in a situation like this? How would he view? And use that as an idea. And I think that you create those intersections too by thinking and building your business and your thought process. Certainly, eventually you're driving yourself to an intersection to meet that person. And so you oftentimes don't have to look for it. It oftentimes just, as they say, it just appears, out of thin air. No, a whole bunch of thought went into it and steps were taken that caused that intersection. And again, that's a simple philosophy. Believe in it. Success will also find you. You just have to, know that it's out there, and think about it enough, and make that every step you take leads you closer.
And talking about you kind of alluded to like some connection there, and being able to meet with like Phil Knight and meet with, wanting to meet Elon Musk. How do you create those situations? Because I think connection is one of those things where I met Sonny. She connected me with you. I'm able to get to you at a different level than other people are because I made this relationship that got to where it is now. How has that helped you along the way, just building relationships with people and having them there to help you build what you're building?
Well, I said a lot of it you stumble into. I hate to say it. I wish there was like a strategy to get in front of really capable people. Oftentimes, like I said, you're standing in front of them, you don't even know it. And so you certainly, in today's world, pick up a phone. A lot of people don't do that. They just don't think that someone's accessible when all you really need to do is ask. Oftentimes, people are much more helpful if you just take the position that I just want to learn. I want to know more. And sometimes these people become available. Oftentimes, I think, again, with your thought processes and the decisions that you make, leads you on a course that causes that intersection. I tend to believe in that a little bit more. And as long as I always want to meet certain people, it seems that an opportunity tends to present itself based on the steps that I've taken, and when the timing's right, again, the opportunity appears.
Yeah, it's amazing that those kind of things just happen. They kind of fall into place when you're not trying to make them happen. I think that a lot of it has to do with just kind of the person you are and the type of personality that you bring. And if you're pushing towards those goals to make them happen, things will happen the way that they're supposed to. It may take kind of a crooked path to get there, but you'll end up where you need to if you're willing to work for it.
Absolutely. The oddest thing is sometimes you have to go left to go right. And the world at different stages of your business don't make some sense. You have to sometimes you have to do things that are counterintuitive. But simply, I think if you're on a path, generally as you narrow down the scope of your interest and you stay committed to, if you want to learn how to race, go to the racetrack. If you want to learn how to fly, go to the airport. And as you begin to do that, that's where you're going to find the people that are there to help. So if you're going to get in the businesses that you want to get into, you're already funneling. It's kind of an approach. Everything funnels down to an end result. Starts with a very wide scope, and sometimes a very broad, exploration period, and it begins to narrow down. You end up in the areas where those people that you want to meet are, because you've chosen a very specific path. That's conscious. You can consciously make that decision and put yourself where you want to be.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, everything, like you said, it's all about doing it. It all narrows down into becoming the better thing every single time. Like this, I can look at this podcasting situation, the interview situation, the things that I do, and listen back to one of the first or second interviews that I did and realize that it has become so much better just by doing it. And that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize. They always want that instant gratification, because what happens is they see the person who was successful. They never saw what it took to get there. And so I think that that's one of those things, is honing that skills like you're talking about.
Right. I'm fascinated by what you do, because I think, as odd as it is, I've been in the products or consumer products game in my whole life, but maybe you haven't even become conscious until the last 2 years, say, about, I might be in the spirits business or in the alcohol category, but I view myself as a communications business. And so what you do is it's definitely by giving to your audience, to listening to your audience. You are creating a future for yourself. And again, I'm not as familiar with some of the big names categorically, but a Joe Rogan who makes $30 million a year doing what he does. About communicating with people. And there's examples of that could take you essentially right there. And the fact that you're in the communications game, creating value, providing a service that people can benefit from. I can't see why with your commitment that this could be, if this is where you want to be, you're already there. Just ratchet your thinking forward. Find examples, be compelling, and you are. So I said, if that's your choice, you'll be there. You are there.
Well, I really appreciate taking time to be on here, and saying that, because that means a lot to me. That's really important to know that what I'm doing is actually kind of helping mold that and push that forward. So I really appreciate that. I really want to thank you for taking the time to be on here again. It was really awesome for me to meet you and kind of just see how genuine you are and how humble you are about what you're doing and being willing to kind of share your story with people.
Well, it's great getting to know you and having finally got to meet you in person. I'd like to think that we've started down a path where we're going to become good friends, and I appreciate that. That's valuable to me, and I love the product that you have and what you're doing. It's amazing. Don't ever stop. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be on here. My phone, anytime you want to talk. And if it's open on your end, I'm always willing to talk, because I think that it's always such a good conversation, and just to talk to someone who thinks outside the box and knows that the sky's kind of the limit.
I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. Thanks so much, Wes.
All right, Mark. Thank you very much. You have a great day. Hey, I want to tell everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be the end of the show here. Until next time, I want to challenge you to find the shape of your success.